today we're diving into a single day, way back in 1757, that completely changed the course of history. We're talking about the Battle of Plassey. Now, this wasn't just any battle. This was the moment a private company basically conquered a kingdom, and in doing so, laid the very foundation for the British Empire in India.
And right away, we run into this central question that just seems impossible. I mean, how on earth did an army of about 3,000 soldiers defeat an army of 50,000? On paper, this should have been a complete wipeout.
The numbers are just, well, they're staggering. You've got Robert Clive and the British East India Company with around 3,000 troops, and most of those were actually Indian soldiers called sepoys. And on the other side, the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, with a massive army of about 50,000 men, not to mention heavy artillery. The odds were just insane. But here's the twist. The answer to how they won isn't about brilliant military tactics or better guns. As the historian Mackintosh put it, the real weapon here was treachery. The battle was basically won long before anyone even fired a shot.
To really understand Plassey, you have to go behind the scenes, into the shadows. We have to talk about a secret palace coup. Because this is really a story about conspiracy, about ambition, and about a whole lot of betrayal.
So the man at the center of this whole storm was Siraj-ud-Dowlah. He was super young, just 23, and he'd just become the ruler, or Nawab, of Bengal, which was the richest province in all of India. But, he was a bit impulsive, and his style kind of rubbed a lot of powerful people in his own court the wrong way. He made enemies fast.
And those enemies, well, they started talking. And pretty soon, you had this kind of coalition of the unhappy. First, there's Mir Jafar, the Nawab's own top general, who felt like he deserved a promotion he never got. Then you have the Jugatsets, who were the most powerful bankers in Bengal. Think of them as the Medicis of India, and they were terrified the Nawab was going to seize their fortune. And finally, you have Robert Clive, the ambitious, clever head of the East India Company, who saw all this drama and thought, opportunity. But this whole conspiracy was almost blown wide open. A merchant named Omichan found out about the plot and tried to blackmail everyone, demanding a ridiculous amount of money to keep quiet. So what did Clive do? This is where it gets like a spy movie. He had two treaties drawn up. A real one on white paper that didn't mention Omichan, and a fake one on red paper that promised Omichan all the money he wanted. They showed the fake one to Omichan, he was happy, and the secret coup was back on. Just a brilliant piece of deception. All right, so now let's get to the battlefield. June 23rd, 1757. The armies finally meet. But you've got to understand, this wasn't really a battle. It was more like the public execution of the secret plan they had all agreed to beforehand. Clive knew he was completely outgunned and outnumbered, so he had to be smart. He picked his spot really carefully. He positioned his tiny force inside a mango grove, which had these high, earthen banks all around it. And those banks gave his men some much-needed protection from the massive artillery attack that was about to come. So the day starts at dawn with this thunderous cannon fire from the Nawab's army. But then something totally random happens. A massive, sudden rainstorm just rolls in. Clive's men, they were prepared. They quickly covered their gunpowder and ammunition with tarps. The Nawab's army didn't. So when the rain stopped, the company's cannons were dry and ready to fire, but the Nawab's huge artillery was totally useless. All their gunpowder was soaked. But the rain wasn't even the real deciding factor. The real knockout punch was the betrayal. As the Nawab's army started to advance, Mir Jafar, remember him, the ambitious general, he just held his entire section of the army back. He did absolutely nothing. So with a huge chunk of his army just standing there and his cannons silent, the Nawab realized what was happening. He'd been betrayed. He panicked and he fled. And if you want to see just how one-sided this whole thing was, just look at the casualties. The Nawab's army lost around 500 men. The East India Company lost 22. That's it. This wasn't a fight. It was a prearranged rout. So, with the Nawab gone, it was payday. The East India Company came to collect its prize. And this is the moment, right here, where everything changes. This is where a trading company starts to act less like a business and more like a government. And the grand prize was something called the Diwani. Basically, this was the legal right given to them by the Mughal emperor for the company to collect all the taxes from Bengal. Think about that for a second. A foreign, private corporation now had the power of a government to tax an entire province. And the money, wow, the financial impact was just immediate and unbelievable.
In just the first 5 years after the battle, the equivalent of almost £5 million was pulled out of Bengal. For that time, that was a truly colossal sum of money. This massive transfer of money came to be known as the drain of wealth. And as historian McIntosh points out, it wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It came at a terrible human cost, leading to famine and widespread poverty for the people of Bengal. From this moment on, the East India Company's entire business model was flipped on its head. It didn't need to bring silver into India to buy Indian goods anymore. Instead, it just used Indian tax money to pay for its exports and, crucially, to fund the military that it would use to conquer the rest of the subcontinent. And this all brings us to the legacy of this one day, because how you remember the Battle of Plassey depends entirely on where you're standing. It's a story with two completely, starkly different versions. For generations in Britain, Plassey was talked about as this heroic, glorious victory, the birth of the Indian Empire. Robert Clive was celebrated as a national hero, Clive of India. But in India, the memory is one of a tragic betrayal. In fact, the name Mir Jafar is still used today as a common word for a traitor.
Now, today, most historians, like William Dalrymple, have really moved away from that old, heroic battle story. The modern view is that Plassey was what it looked like all along, a corporate takeover, a palace coup carried out through bribery and conspiracy, not through military brilliance.
Ultimately, Plassey is the story of a corporation that became so powerful, it essentially became the state. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Here we are more than 250 years later, in a world full of massive global corporations. What lines between corporate and state power are being challenged, or maybe even erased right now?